All right, students, welcome to Pre-AP Algebra 2, where today we are going to go over a few of these problems, just a few, to get you started. We'll start with number 1, because why not? We're going to add the polynomials together. Now, because we're adding the polynomials, and we're just simplifying, the necessity of these parentheses is not important, okay? It might become important. If this symbol was a minus sign, it would be important, but it's not, so we can just write out. And I want you to, if you could, try to mimic my handwriting, all right? So we're going to put equals. Let me zoom in here for you. And now we're just going to write it out like this, 7, and then we're going to put minus 4x squared plus 5x squared minus 8. And now I'm going to highlight the common terms because that's what we're going to combine like terms. So first I'm going to highlight the constant terms, 7 and negative 8. And then I'm going to highlight the algebraic expressions, negative 4x squared and positive 5x squared. And so the way that we're going to do this is we're going to combine these terms like this, okay? And then we're going to combine these terms here like this. Okay, so 7 plus negative 8, or 7 minus 8, that's going to equal negative 1. And then negative 4x squared plus 5x squared. The first thing we do is we add this term here. This is called the coefficient. So let's add those coefficients. Negative 4 plus 5 is 1. And convention tells us we don't write 1x squared. So we just write plus x squared. Now, there is a stylistic issue with what's just been written here. Very typically, and the way it's done in math, is that this goes first, okay? So we need to do a switcheroo here. And so be careful because this has got a minus sign, all right? So when we're going to move this behind the x squared, all right? It's not so important. I mean, it doesn't change anything about the substance of the problem, but it does change the way that it looks. And when we start factoring these things, it becomes important that this term is up front. Or when we start graphing these things, et cetera, evaluating functions and stuff. So let's get into the habit early of writing it like that. So that's the simplified expression. There's nothing to factor out, like we don't see any common factors, so we just leave it like that. Now, in my class, especially pre-AP, we never stop there, okay? We always check our work. And so how do you check your work? Like, how would you check it without a calculator? Okay, that's important. Here's how you check your work. So write check. And the first thing I want you to do is plug a 0 in to this polynomial expression up here. So just is real easy. Just do 7 minus, now you plug a 0 in right there, this whole thing becomes 0. 7 minus 0 plus, you plug a 0 in here, this is all 0, plus negative 8. Okay. So what does that equal? 7 minus 0 is 7 minus 8. So what do we get? We get negative 1. Okay. Now we're going to do the same thing here. So now we're going to plug in for x squared minus 1 a 0, where the x is. So that's 0. 0 squared is 0. So we say, 0 squared minus 1 equals minus 1. And so what we're looking for here is that these two numbers match. And because they match, we know that we were right. that our simplified answer is correct. So that's how you check your work when you're simplifying polynomials. All right, there's no need to do another addition. Okay, these are just more complex versions of what you've already done. You can do it. And then there's a really long one. All you've got to do is just combine all the like terms. These are plus signs, so there's no hidden little nasty distributions that have to occur. So now we're going to simplify a difference. Now it does become important. Okay, so now we have to keep the parentheses for just a minute. So this first part, we don't need to touch for now. But we have to perform a distributive property of this minus sign to both terms inside the parentheses there. Okay? So let's write it out. This is going to equal 8x cubed minus 4x, distribute the negative, minus 2x, distribute the negative, minus 6x cubed. And now let's highlight our like terms. Here's an 8x cubed and a negative 6x cubed. And then I've got a negative 4x and a negative 2x. Pretty simple. So we're going to combine the green terms. And then we're going to combine the blue terms, right? So 8, we remember, add the coefficients. 8 and negative 6. What do you get? It's 8 minus 6. That's 2. So this equals 2x cubed. And then we add the coefficients here. Now remember, we're adding two negative numbers. Okay? So when we're adding two negative numbers, the result is going to be a greater magnitude negative number. Okay? So like a smaller number, but greater magnitude negative. So negative 4 plus negative 2 is negative 6. And then we just tack on the x. So we just write minus 6x. Now the question is, are we done here? Or is there any factoring that we can do? Well, I don't know what the book would tell you to do, but there is factoring that we can do. We can actually do what's something called greatest common factor. So what's the greatest common factor of these two terms? Just look at them. Think about it for a second. Let me use a different color. So from my eyes, the GCF, okay, right, you could say greatest common factor is 2x. All right, so that's going to be 2x. So what I'm going to do now is divide both of these terms by 2x. Okay? And what's going to happen here is we're going to perform this polynomial division. It's going to be real simple. We'll just use the quotient rule or the division rule of exponents. And I'm basically going to pull that 2x out and set it out front. So check this out. It's going to look like this. 2x, open parentheses. And now let's remember over in side work the division rule for exponents. Okay? If I've got x squared over x, which is, well, I've got x cubed over x, right? You have to remember that that x has an exponent of 1. It's understood to have an exponent of 1. And when we divide and the bases are the same, we subtract the exponents. So when we're dividing exponents and the bases are the same, and this is called the base, like the x is the base, we subtract the exponents. So this would equal x raised to the power of 3 minus 1, which is equal to x squared. Okay, so let's go back to our problem. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So what I do is I just write like cancel, right? Because it's a 1. X cubed divided by x is x squared. So that leaves x squared. Okay, on top, right? So the denominator has been fully eliminated. Now let's move here. Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. And we can apply the division rule of exponents and the rule of a zero exponent. So let me show that over here. So this is the zero rule of exponents. So we've got this issue where I've got x to the first power over x to the first power, right? And I'm going to apply the division rule first, which says I subtract the exponents because the bases are the same. So I have x to the 1 minus 1. Well, now I have this weird situation where I have x to the 0. Now the zero rule for exponents states that anything raised to the power of 0 equals 1. Okay? So it's just a 1, right? So this is a 1 like that. We don't have to write it, because what you've got here, let me just show this. You've got negative 6 divided by 2, which we said was negative 3, right? And then you have x to the first over x to the first, which we said was equal to 1. And so what's left is negative 3 times 1, and that's just equal to negative 3. So the simplification of this fraction is just minus 3. Now, this is the answer I would prefer, that you do that extra simplification by doing greatest common factor. This answer is technically correct, right? Or sorry, this answer, wherever we were when we, I guess it was this, right? This answer here was technically correct, but we could factor out that 2x, and that can be really useful later on as we get more advanced. So I would like to see this as the answer. Now we're going to check our answers, okay? So we'll just do a check real quick. Look, I love plugging in 0 because it just makes it super easy. Look, everything becomes 0 because the x is a 0, so that's a 0. Then that's a 0. That's a 0. That's a 0. So this comes to 0. Now we do the same thing here. I plug as well. First I have to distribute, right? So I plug, if I'm going to evaluate this, 2x and then x squared minus 3, right? First I'm going to distribute this, and I'll have 2x to the third power minus 6x, right? So and that's what we had here, remember? So if I plug in a 0 there, that goes to 0 and that goes to 0. So everything is 0. That means we're good. And we did it right, okay? So that's how you do that. Remember here, the same thing, you're going to distribute that negative sign first before you start combining like terms. All right? Now let's move on. This is just a more complicated version of it, and then a more complicated version of it. More complicated. Now we're moving on to multiplication of polynomials there, or simplifying using multiplication. And we'll come to that in just a moment. So we're going to find product, okay? We've already kind of done this. So when you see something sitting next to a parentheses, you should automatically think distributive property. So the distributive property, we like to draw these arrows, okay? So remember, we multiply the coefficients and then we multiply the variables. And if you don't remember what a coefficient is, that's a coefficient right there. The number in front of the letter is the coefficient. So the coefficient of this letter is a 1. And do you remember what the exponent is when there's nothing written? It's a 1. That's going to become relevant here in just a moment. So first, let's multiply the coefficients. 4 times 1. 4 times 1 is 4. Now we have to do the product rule for exponents. So if we don't remember that, let's just go over here and we'll just look at it. V cubed times V to the first equals V to the 3 plus 1, okay, which equals V to the 4th. So I have 4V to the 4th power. Now, be careful here. Multiply the 4 times the 4, and you get 16, so plus 16. And then they just tack the V cubed on, V cubed. Tack that on. Alrighty? Now, in this case, we don't want to attempt to factor out the greatest common factor because it's already been done, right? That's how the problem began. We just want to check and make sure that we did this right, okay? So let's try plugging in a number. How about 1, right? So let me take the first, this is my check, right? I'll take the first expression, 4 times 1 cubed multiplied by 1 plus 4. All right? Well, what does that equal? Well, 1 cubed is 1, so 4 times 1 is 4. 4. And then inside the parentheses, that's just addition, that's 5. So 4 times 5, it evaluates out to 20. So the question is, does this evaluate out to 20? Well, let's write it down. 4, and then we have times 1 raised to the 4th power plus 16 times 1 raised to the 3rd power. Well, what is that? 1 to the 4th is 1, and 1 to the 3rd is 1. So we just have 4 plus 16, and that gives us 20. And so now you have confidence that you did the problem right. And you can put the box around the answer. But please understand that for me as a teacher, I care less about this than I do about this. I want to see the check. I want to see the side work. I want to see these arrows, all right? The reason I want to see that is because let's say you get it wrong, okay? And you write down the wrong answer, but you didn't show any work. There's nothing for me to do to figure out how to help you by reading it. So that's why I want to see work. That's why work is such an important thing. Well, we've already done this. Okay. So products, let's see if there's anything. All right, now we're going to be multiplying two binomials. I don't know what you've been taught in the past. There are two ways to do this, and I'll show both ways in two separate problems. The first way is FOIL, which stands for, some of you are saying it out right now, first, outer, inner, last. Okay, first, outer, inner, last. FOIL. And so a student of mine had a really cool way of showing this. She said she makes like a moon. So first times first, okay, I have to make the ink bigger. So first times first, outer times outer, and it's going to make like a crescent. Inner times inner, and then last times last. It kind of makes like a moon shape. If we fill it in with, I guess the moon's going to be blue. We fill that in here. Kind of looks like a little moon. So that's one way to remember FOIL. However you remember it is fine. So let's multiply first times first. Now I write this out. A lot of students get all hacked off because I write this step out like this, but this is going to save. It's going to save you So just write out exactly what you think you're going to do. First, let's put parentheses. You're going to multiply 4a times negative 3a, right? And then you're going to add, so that's first times first. Now outer times outer, 4a times positive 6. Open parentheses, 4a times 6. So I want to see this. I don't want this to occur in your brain, because if it occurs in your brain and you make a mistake, I can't help you. Now put a plus sign. Inner times inner, negative 8 times negative 3a. So in parentheses, negative 8 times negative 3a. And then last times last, negative 8 times positive 6. Negative 8 times 6. Right? So this intermediate step is probably something that you haven't done too many times, but I want you to do it because I want to see this. This is where all the mistakes happen. And so the more you show me of this, the more I can help you. So now we're going to multiply the coefficients. Okay, coefficients here. So 4 times negative 3 is, we're still in parentheses here, negative 12. And then a times a. What's a times a? Well, the product rule says, remember, that there is a 1 here. The product rule says if your bases are the same, like a, you add the exponents. So 1 plus 1 is 2. So a times a is a squared. So we're going to write negative 12 a squared. Okay, now I know some of you are smashing your heads against the desk saying this is so easy. Why is he making it so hard? Here's why. Because this is going to get way, way more complicated. And having these good habits up front is going to save you in the long run. So here on this part, we're just going to multiply 4 times 6, and that's 24. So plus, in parentheses, 24a plus, okay, now be careful here. You've got two negatives. A negative times a negative is a positive. So negative 8 times negative 3 is positive 24. So we're going to write 24. And there's just this a off by himself, so we just tack them on. Plus negative 8 times 6. Well, 8 times 6 is 48. Negative 8 times 6 is negative 48. So in parentheses, we're going to put negative 48. And now we're going to play the game combine like terms. So do I see any other squares? No. Do I see any linear terms? Linear meaning there is no exponent, but there is a letter. Yes. Here and here. So those can be combined. And then I don't see any other constant terms, just numbers by themselves. So we're going to leave the first part the same. We can drop now the parentheses and just write negative 12 a squared. And now we can combine these terms. 24 plus 24 is 48. We're just adding, so we're not going to do anything with the a's. We're just going to put 48a plus 48a, and then minus 48. Okay, minus 48. Now, does everybody see that we can factor some stuff out of this? Greatest common factor is what I'm referring to? Absolutely. 12 is the greatest common factor. And we can factor out a 12, or we could even factor out a negative 12. I'll do the negative 12 since that's kind of interesting, since it's going to change one of the signs. So put parentheses around the entire expression, and then just put line, 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 negative 12, negative 12, negative 12. We're going to pull a negative 12 out. So we're going to pull that guy out like this. Okay. It's like reverse distribution. So these cancel. I have negative 12 here. And inside the parentheses, I just have a squared. Now 48 divided by 12 is 4. So 48 divided by negative 12 is negative 4. I'm not doing anything with the a, so it's going to be minus 4a. And now negative 48 divided by negative 12. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. 48 divided by 12 is 4. So this is plus 4. Now, when we get a little bit further along in algebra, you might be asked to factor this, right? But right now, that's all we need to do. So you put a box around that. And to save time, because I know your time is valuable, and you probably want to get this done, we won't check it, all right? So I'll break my own rule. That's how you do it. I told you I'd show you the other way. So I'll show you the other way. But let me just check and see how hard this is going to get. Let me show you the other way to do it with this one, number 16. So like I said, there's two ways. There's FOIL and then there's box. So here's how box works. You've got two components here, a binomial, and then you got a trinomial, 3 components. So what we need is a 3-column by 2-row box, okay? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to make a big rectangle like this. And then I'm going to take my ruler and draw a line, okay, like this. Nope, still hooked onto that. There we go. This, drop the ruler, and now I'm basically just going to make 3 columns freehand. All right, now what you do is you're going to put this 3v squared right here. So let's switch the colors back to black. So we put 3v squared. We zoom in a little bit. And then we put plus 8v and then plus 2. Okay? And now right here we put 2v, and then here we put negative 4. And now lots of students prefer this method. So what you're going to do is just multiply everything to fill out these boxes. So we're going to do 3v squared times 2v. And remember, there's a 1 right there. There's a 1 right there. Just don't want you to forget the exponent. So first we'll multiply the coefficients. 3 times 2 is 6. And then v squared times v to the first is v to the 2 plus 1, which is v to the 3rd power. Now, how about 3v squared times negative 4? 3 times negative 4 is negative 12. And then we just tag the ride. Now, 8 times 2 is 16. And then v to the first times v to the first is v to the second, because it's v to the 1 plus 1. Now, 8v to the first times negative 4. Well, negative 4 times 8 is negative 32. Then we just tack on the v, okay? You don't have to write v to the first. Now, 2 times 2v to the first. 2 times 2 is 4. Tack on the v. And then 2 times negative 4 is negative v. Now, what you're going to do is combine like terms. You're going to notice a pattern here. These are like terms, and then these are like terms. I call them tic-tacs, all right? Because you can draw like a tic-tac shape. Let me get another color and show you. You can draw like this. You're going to combine these terms, and then you're going to combine these terms. So it makes like 2 tic-tac shapes, 2 pill shapes, okay? So we always lead with the greatest exponent. So when we write it out, we're going to start with 6v cubed. 6v cubed. And now we'll just write it out. We'll simplify it later. Minus 12v squared plus 16v squared minus 32v plus 4v minus 8. We've written it all out. And we already know that we are going to combine these terms. And we already know that we're going to combine these terms. All right, so we'll do that now in this last step. We have 6v cubed. And then how about negative 12 plus 16 gives us positive 4, right? V squared. And then negative 32 plus 4, well, negative 32 plus 4 is kind of like subtracting 4 from 32, but stick it in negative sign. So would that be 28? So that would be minus 28v minus 8. Now, is there anything that you can see that we can factor out? The only thing I can see is a 2. Like the greatest common factor is a 2. So if I wanted to do that, and I'm not saying that you do, but if you wanted to, you could factor out a 2, and we're going to do it. Divide, 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 divide. All right, this is a habit to get into. It makes you start to notice patterns. Trust me, you're going to need this later. You're going to have to do this, so you might as well start now. So this is going to be equal to, open parentheses, and what's 6 divided by 2? So we got 3v cubed, and then 4 divided by 2 is 2, and it's plus 2v squared. 28 divided by 2 is 14, so it's minus 14v, and then negative 8 divided by 2 is minus 4. Close the parentheses off. And so that would be the final answer on that one. Okay. Now I showed you how to do, I think, all the types of problems. I think you got it from here. They just get more complex. Okay. So if you have any trouble with it, email me, let me know. You have my phone number. You've got me on YouTube. I'd be happy to work any of these other problems that I didn't work here. But I hope this gave you a good start. Now, for the rest of the class period, what I want you to do is work silently on this.